When I finally gathered the courage to ask about the wedding, my daughter-in-law looked at me with the coldest smile. Her words pierced through the air like a knife. It already happened yesterday. For a moment, my heart stopped. The walls of my own home felt like they were closing in. I had waited for this day, supported them through every struggle, believed I would be part of their joy, but in that instant, I realized the truth: I was never considered special. I was never meant to be included. I remember the beginning, when my son first told me about Lena, the woman who would later become my daughter-in-law. He was young, still struggling to find his place in the world. His job was unstable, his income barely enough to survive. As a mother, what could I do? I could not stand by and watch my only child sink. So I stepped in every month without fail, took $500 from my own modest savings, and I paid their rent. Not once, not twice, but for 3 long years. Do you know what that means? 36 months of carrying the burden that should not have been mine. 36 months of quietly tightening my own belt, so that they could live comfortably. 36 months of sacrifice, of choosing their needs over my dreams. While they built their life together, I dismantled pieces of my own. I remember the day they moved into their small apartment. The walls were bare, the rooms empty. Lena looked around, her eyes restless. My son shifted uncomfortably, ashamed. That night, I returned with a truck, not filled with riches, but with love. I bought them a sofa soft enough for tired bodies, a dining table, where they could share meals, a bed, where they could rest their heads in peace. Piece by piece, room by room, I filled their home with furniture. Not secondhand scraps, not leftovers from someone else's life, but items I paid for with my own hard-earned money. Each item had a story. Each receipt was another reminder of my devotion. When they sat on that sofa, they sat on my sacrifice. When they dined at that table, they dined on my love. When they slept in that bed, they slept in the comfort I provided. Yet somehow, in their hearts, none of it mattered. There were nights when I would open my own fridge and find it nearly empty. But then, I would think of them. Of my son coming home late, exhausted. Of Lena opening the fridge, seeing bare shelves, feeling despair. I could not allow that, so I went to the grocery store. I filled bags with milk, bread, meat, and vegetables. I stocked their shelves until food overflowed. I did it quietly, without fanfare. No one asked, no one thanked me, but I did it anyway, because that is what love does. Even when it hurts, even when it costs. And the cost was not just money. It was my health. My peace. My dreams. I wanted to travel to see the ocean, to breathe in the fresh air of places I had only seen in books. But vacations require savings. And savings went to them. I wanted to renovate my small house, to fix the leaking roof that dripped when it rained. But repairs require funds, and funds went to them. I wanted to rest, to finally breathe after years of hard work. But rest requires freedom, and freedom was not mine. Instead, I lived with the constant weight of responsibility, their responsibility. I cannot count the number of times I sat at my kitchen table, head in hands, wondering how much more I could give. I told myself it was temporary. That once my son found stability, once Lena supported him, once they were settled, I could finally breathe. But temporary turned into years, and years turned into exhaustion. I gave, and gave, and gave. Until I no longer knew where I ended and their needs began. And it was not just the material things. I gave them my time, my energy, my heart. When they fought, who did they call? Me. When bills piled up, who did they turn to? Me. When Lena felt overwhelmed, who listened for hours on the phone? Me. I became not just a mother, but a provider, a counselor, a savior. And I did it willingly. Because I believed in family, I believed that love was measured by what you sacrifice, and I was willing to sacrifice everything. There were moments, tiny flickers, when I thought my sacrifices were seen. On my birthday, when my son gave me a small gift, I thought, he remembers. When Lena smiled sweetly and said, "We appreciate you," I thought, she means it. But those moments were illusions, shadows of gratitude, quickly swallowed by entitlement. For soon after the thank yous came new requests, more rent, more groceries, more help. The cycle never ended, and I could not say no, because every time I looked into my son's eyes, I saw the little boy he once was, the boy who held my hand, the boy who depended on me, the boy I swore I would protect. Even when he grew into a man, even when he chose someone else, I carried them through storms. Through debt, through nights when they had nothing but each other and me. And still, I believed I would stand by his side on the happiest day of his life. That all my sacrifices would be acknowledged, if not repaid. I dreamed of watching my son say his vows, of seeing Lena walk down the aisle. I dreamed of being seated in the front row, honored for all I had done. I dreamed of belonging. But dreams are fragile, and sometimes, they shatter with a single smile. Because when I asked about the wedding, after all the rent I paid, after all the furniture I bought, after all the meals I provided, I was not a guest, I was not family. I was not even considered. Instead, I was left outside, holding receipts and memories that meant nothing. And with that one cold sentence, it already happened yesterday. Everything I had ever given was erased. I look back now, and I wonder, was it love that blinded me? Was it guilt that chained me? Or was it simply hope that one day, my sacrifices would matter? I will never know. But I do know this: love without respect is slavery, and sacrifice without gratitude is just self-destruction. And for 3 years, I destroyed myself. For them, the words echoed in my ears. We only invited special people. Special people. Again, and again, and again. The phrase stabbed at my chest like a knife. Was I not special? Had my years of sacrifice meant nothing? Had my love been invisible all along? I looked at my son, my own flesh and blood. But he would not meet my eyes. His gaze dropped to the floor, heavy with shame. Or was it fear? Or, worse, was it indifference? The silence between us said more than words ever could. He knew what Lena meant. He knew what I felt, and still, he said nothing. Meanwhile, Lena, she leaned back on the sofa I had bought with my own money. Her legs crossed elegantly. Her hand brushed the fabric like she owned it. Her smile was not warm. It was victorious. She was comfortable. She was confident. She was in control. And I was nothing but an outsider in my own story. Special people. The phrase repeated in my head. Every repetition was a slap. Every echo was a humiliation. Special people. As if I were just a stranger, as if I had not kept them afloat when their world was sinking. Special people. As if the bills I paid, the food I provided, the furniture I bought, meant absolutely nothing. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. The words caught like stones. All I managed was a whisper. Special people. Lena's smile only widened. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with cold sweetness. Yes, only those who truly mattered. Her words burned. Each syllable was a dagger. And my son said nothing. Not one word to defend me. Not one protest to honor me. I felt the heat rise in my face. Shame, rage, grief. It was as if the ground had split beneath me, and I was falling into a pit of humiliation. How could my son sit there, silent, while his wife erased me with a single phrase? How could he let her lounge on the furniture I bought, while she mocked me openly in my own home? I remembered the nights I had stayed awake, worrying about their rent. The mornings I skipped breakfast, so I could afford to stock their fridge. The hours I worked overtime, my body aching, to give them what they needed. And this was my reward: to be dismissed, to be erased, to be told I was not special. The humiliation deepened, my hands trembled, my heart pounded in my chest like a drum. I looked at my son once more, hoping for a lifeline, for a spark of loyalty, for a shred of love. But his eyes never rose. He stared at the floor, cowardly, refusing to face me, and in that moment, I realized, my sacrifice had not built gratitude, it had built dependence, and dependence had turned into entitlement. Lena shifted again, leaning into him. Her hand touched his arm, staking her claim. Her eyes flicked toward me with the faintest glimmer of triumph. She had one. She had my son's silence. She had his loyalty, and I had nothing. Special people. The words rang louder now, almost mocking me. I could hear them in every corner of the room. I could feel them pressing against my skin, branding me as unworthy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to demand an answer. But humiliation silenced me. It wrapped itself around my throat like chains. I rose to my feet, legs shaking. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. The walls closed in tighter. And still, Lena smiled. And still, my son looked away. That was the moment my heart broke. Not because of her words, but because of his silence. Special people. I will never forget those 2 words. They cut deeper than any insult. They carried the weight of rejection, dismissal, betrayal. And every time I remember them, I feel the sting of humiliation all over again. Humiliation is not just being excluded, it is being erased by those you gave everything. It is watching your sacrifices turned into shadows. It is realizing you were never seen, never valued, never loved the way you thought. And in that living room, with Lena's triumphant smile and my son's cowardly silence, I tasted the bitter poison of humiliation for the first time, but it would not be the last because humiliation has a way of multiplying. It plants itself in your heart. And with every silence, every betrayal, every dismissal, it grows in. As I stood there, heart bleeding, soul trembling, I knew this was only the beginning. The beginning of betrayals I had not yet imagined. The beginning of humiliations I had not yet endured. The beginning of a battle I never asked for, and yet, in that moment, I could not fight. I could only stand, broken, humiliated, and whisper the words that haunted me. Special people. Days passed after that cruel moment, but the sting of humiliation never left me. The words special people haunted my every thought. I replayed them in the silence of my nights, feeling each echo like a wound that refused to heal. I told myself I would step back. I would protect what little remained of my dignity, but villains never rest, and hypocrisy always finds its way back. It began with a knock on my door. When I opened it, there they stood, my son and Lena. Her smile was different this time. Not cold, not triumphant, but sugary sweet, almost sickening. "Hello," she said softly, her voice dripping with false kindness. "We've been thinking about you." I almost laughed, thinking about me. The same woman who told me I wasn't special. She leaned in, her tone rehearsed. We're in a bit of a difficult situation." Her eyes glistened not with real tears, but with the performance of them. My son stood beside her, silent, head slightly lowered, as if ashamed to be part of this charade. "We need help," she continued. "There's a down payment for a house, and the deadline is tomorrow." A house, so that was it. They had excluded me from their wedding. They had humiliated me with cruel words, and now, suddenly, I was worthy enough to pay for their future. I stared at her, my silence heavier than words. Inside, my heart twisted. Part of me still longed for my son's voice, for him to defend me, to break the cycle. But he remained quiet, and in that silence, Lena pressed harder. "You've always been there for us," she cooed. "You're so generous, so caring. We knew you'd understand." The hypocrisy burned like fire. The same lips that declared me unworthy now painted me as their savior. When I didn't answer, she shifted her tactic. "Actually," she added quickly, "it's not just the house. It's medical bills, too." Her hand clutched her stomach dramatically. "My health hasn't been the best, you know." I looked at her carefully. Her face was glowing, her body strong, no signs of sickness, only signs of deceit. "Medical bills," she repeated, as though layering lie upon lie would make it real. In that moment, something inside me cracked, and for the first time, I saw them for what they truly were. Not struggling children in need of help. Not family building their life together, but manipulators. Users. Actors in a play where I was cast as the endless provider. My mind flashed back to the sacrifices I had made. The rent I paid month after month, without fail, the furniture I bought, every table, every chair, every bed, the food I stocked, every loaf of bread, every bottle of milk. And how had they repaid me? By excluding me, by humiliating me, by calling me anything but special. And now they dared to stand in front of me, their voices dipped in honey, their hands reaching out for more. I let them speak. I let them weave their lies. I let them twist their faces into masks of desperation. But inside, my heart was screaming. I saw the hypocrisy naked before me. And I knew if I gave in again, if I opened my wallet once more, I would be nothing but their fool. Still, my son's silence broke me more than Lena's words. He stood there, a man I raised, a man I sacrificed everything for, and he allowed her to speak for both of them. Not once did he say, "Mother, I'm sorry." Not once did he admit, "We wronged you." He let the lies spill from her lips, and all the while, his eyes never met mine. I finally spoke. My voice was low, trembling, but firm. "Tell me," I asked, "was I special enough to be at your wedding?" Silence. Was I special enough to sit in the front row, to watch my only son promise his life to his bride? More silence. Was I special enough, I whispered, to even be told the truth? Their smiles faltered. Lena's eyes narrowed, realizing her act was failing. I stepped closer, my voice sharper now. "You call me generous when you need money, You call me caring when you need food. You call me family when you need favors. But when you celebrate your joy, when you honor your milestones, when you choose who matters most, I am not there. I am not special. The mask cracked. Lena's sweetness soured into irritation. My son shifted uncomfortably, still silent, and in that moment, the hypocrisy was undeniable. They wanted my sacrifices, but not my presence. They wanted my money but not my love. They wanted my support, but never my dignity. I felt tears sting my eyes, but this time, they were not tears of weakness, they were tears of awakening. For the first time, I saw clearly. Their kindness was fake. Their sweetness was a mask. Their needs were endless. And my sacrifices would never, ever be enough, so I drew a line. No, I said firmly. For years, I gave you everything. For years, I carried your burdens as if they were my own. But today, I will not. Lena's mouth fell open. My son finally looked up, his face pale, his eyes filled with panic. But I did not waver. You excluded me when it mattered most. You humiliated me in my own home. And now you dare to return with lies and sweetness. I shook my head. Not anymore, never again. The air grew heavy, their faces hardened. The act was over, and as they turned to leave, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Because in their hypocrisy, I had found clarity. They had shown me their truth, and I had finally chosen mine. But deep inside, I knew this was not the end. Manipulators never stop with one attempt. And villains rarely walk away quietly. This was only the beginning of a new war. A war for my dignity, my home, my peace. And, though they thought me weak, they had no idea what awakening had begun within me. That night, I could not sleep. The silence of the house was crushing. Every tick of the clock echoed like thunder in my ears. I sat alone at the kitchen table, my hands trembling, my heart heavy. The words replayed again, special people, over and over. Like a curse, I pressed my palms against my face, and for the first time in years, I let the tears fall freely. At dawn, I wandered to the bathroom. The mirror stared back at me, its surface fogged with the breath of my exhaustion, and when I finally wiped it clear, I saw myself, not the mother I thought I was. Not the provider who carried her family, but a woman broken, lined with sacrifice, etched with disappointment. My reflection whispered the truth. If I don't stand up now, I will always be treated as less than special. Those words jolted me. It was as if the woman in the mirror was no longer me, but someone stronger, someone waiting to be born. For years, I had given everything. For years, I had bent until I nearly broke. For years, I had believed that love was enough, but love without respect is slavery? And I was tired of being a slave. I leaned closer to the mirror, staring into my own eyes. They were swollen, red from tears, but beneath the weakness, I saw a flicker of something else. Fire, a fire I thought had died long ago. A fire buried under years of humiliation, but now, it was rising again, no longer victim, no longer silent, no longer invisible. I would fight, not for their approval, not for their recognition, but for myself. I whispered aloud, my voice shaky but determined. I will not be erased. I will not be used. I will not live another day believing I am less than special. The words felt foreign on my tongue, but powerful in my chest. I straightened my shoulders. I inhaled deeply, and for the first time, I felt the weight of years of sacrifice begin to lift. The awakening did not come all at once. It came in fragments. Small realizations, sharp and piercing. I realized that my love had been unconditional, but their love had always been transactional. I realized that I had given them my strength, and in return, they had given me weakness. I realized that I had carried them on my back, and they had never once looked down to thank me. And then another truth struck me harder than all the rest. If I continued this way, I would die with an empty heart and an empty wallet. Forgotten, dismissed, unloved, and that I could not allow. I returned to the kitchen. The early morning light spilled through the window, painting the room in soft gold. On the counter sat a coffee cup. Simple, ceramic, worn with use. I filled it. The steam rose, curling like smoke. I wrapped my hands around it, and as I took the first sip, I made a vow. This coffee was not just a drink, it was a symbol of new beginning, a moment of clarity, a promise to myself. As I sipped, I imagined the future. Not a future of endless sacrifice. Not a future where I waited for scraps of respect, but a future where I lived for me. Where my money went to my dreams. Where my time was spent on my joy. where my love was given to those who cherished it. For once, I would be the one to choose. Not them, not their demands, not their manipulation. Me. I rose from the table, my step steady, my heart firm. The old Mitha, silent giver, the woman who endured humiliation in exchange for crumbs of affection. She was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone fierce, someone unafraid, a fighter. The next time they knocked on my door, I would not tremble, I would not yield, I would not reach for my wallet with shaking hands. Instead, I would stand tall, I would look Lena in the eye, and I would let my silence speak louder than her lies. The mirror had shown me the truth. The coffee had sealed my vow, and now, there was no turning back. That morning, I stepped outside. The air was cool, fresh, alive with possibility. I looked at the sky blue endless, unbothered by human betrayal. And I whispered once more, for the universe to hear, I am not less, I am not weak, I am not invisible, I am special, and I will fight to be treated as such. From victim to fighter, from silence to voice, from erased to remembered. The awakening had begun. And nothing, not Lena's arrogance, not my son's silence, not their manipulations would ever chain me again. But deep down, I knew, when you stop being a victim, when you finally rise, the world does not applaud, the villains do not retreat, instead, they fight harder, and though I was ready to claim my power, I could feel the storm already gathering on the horizon. A storm of conflict, a storm of threats, a storm that would test my awakening and challenge the fire I had just found. But this time, I would not cower, I would not surrender. For the first time, I was ready to fight back. The days after my awakening felt strange. For the first time in years, I was breathing differently, not with fear, not with guilt, but with resolve. I had drawn a line. I had spoken my no, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, they would finally leave me alone. But manipulators do not give up easily. When sweet words fail, they sharpen their claws. When fake tears dry up, they bring out threats. And that was when the storm truly began. It started with phone calls. At first, Lena's voice was sugary again. Please, we're family, don't do this. When I stayed silent, the tone shifted. You owe us. After all, we've been through together. Oh, them. The irony burned in my chest. I ignored the calls, but silence, to them, was provocation. The next day letters arrived, cold printed, filled with legal jargon. Threatening tones hidden beneath polite words. They spoke of agreements, of financial obligations, of shared property. Shared property. My hands shook as I read the words. They were trying to claim ownership of my home. The very house I had worked for all my life. I went numb. Was this truly my son? The boy I raised, the child who once held my hand in crowded streets, now sending lawyers to take what was mine. Every page was a betrayal written in ink. Every letter a wound deeper than the last, and yet, I knew this was only the beginning. One evening, as the sun set, I returned home from a long walk. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped inside, and froze. My blood ran cold when I saw who was waiting in my living room, their attorney, smiling. The smile was not kind, it was sharp, smug, victorious. He rose from my sofa, the one I had paid for, now occupied by a stranger carrying threats. Good evening, he said smoothly. I represent your son and his wife. We need to discuss some legal matters. My heart thundered in my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw him out, to demand how he dared step into my sanctuary. But instead, I stood frozen. He laid out papers on my coffee table, each one a dagger, each one a threat. According to my clients, he began, there were verbal agreements, promises of support, implied commitments. He glanced at me with cold amusement. They believed this house, this property, was built not by you alone, but for them, and thus, they are entitled to a share. Entitled, the word made me sick. I clenched my fists, every muscle in my body screamed. But his words kept pouring out. Now, of course, he said, we don't want things to get ugly. If you're willing to cooperate, perhaps transfer partial ownership. This can be handled quietly. Quietly, as if robbery was a matter of courtesy. As if betrayal could be softened with politeness. I felt my knees weaken. The room swayed, but then, a voice inside me roared louder than my fear. No, not this time. Not my home, not the last piece of myself. I still owned. I drew in a shaky breath. This house, I said slowly, was built by my blood, by my sweat, by my sacrifices. I pointed at the papers. not by them, for them. And they will never take it. The attorney smirked, as though he had heard this defiance before. Very well, he said coolly. Then we'll see you in court. When he left, I collapsed into the chair, my body trembling. Fear crawled through me, but beneath it, a strange calm. Because this was it. The battle I had avoided for so long. The fight I never wanted, but could no longer escape. Days turned into weeks. Letters piled higher. Phone calls grew harsher. Every tactic was used. Pleas, threats, insults, demands. They spoke of lawyers. They spoke of judges. They spoke of victories they believed were already theirs. And yet, I held firm. At night, I would walk through my house. I would run my hands along the walls, the doors, the photographs. This was not just a building. It was my life. It was every sacrifice I had ever made. It was the only thing left, proved I still mattered, and I vowed no one would take it from me. But, with every vow came new fear. What if I lost? What if the law favored them? What if, after everything, I ended up with nothing? The weight pressed on me like a mountain. But then, I remembered the mirror, the reflection that had spoken the truth, the fire that had begun to rise, and I whispered to myself each night, I will not lose. Not this time. Still, the threats escalated. Neighbors began whispering. Rumors spread like wildfire. Lena told anyone who would listen thought I was selfish, that I was greedy, that I was denying my son his rightful inheritance. Every word cut deep. But I held on, because the truth was stronger than their lies, and yet, the fear never left. Every knock on the door made my heart raced. Every envelope in the mailbox made my stomach twist. Until one day, there came a letter unlike the rest. Its words were final. A court date was set. The battle I dreaded was no longer a threat. It was real. I sat in silence, the paper trembling in my hands. The future loomed before me, uncertain, terrifying. But as fear filled me, so did something else. Resolve. If they wanted a war, then they would get one. Not with tears, not with surrender, but with the full strength of a woman. Woe had finally awakened, and so, the stage was set. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was here, and I was ready to face it, because this time, I would not stand alone. This time, I would find allies, and together, we would fight back. The court date loomed closer. Every morning I woke with a pit in my stomach. Every night I fell asleep with fear pressing on my chest. I had drawn my line. I had refused their demands. But standing alone against lawyers, against lies, felt like standing in the middle of a storm without shelter. And then, help came from places I never expected. It began with a knock on my door. Not a threatening one, not the heavy pounding of demands, but a gentle, cautious knock. I opened the door, and there stood Mrs. Green, my neighbor of many years. Her eyes were kind, but filled with worry. She hesitated, then spoke softly. I've seen what's been happening, she said. I've seen more than you know. For a moment, I froze. Had she heard the whispers? Did she believe the lies Lena had been spreading? But then, Mrs. Green reached for my hand. I know the truth, she said, firmly. I remember all the nights you carried groceries into their apartment. I remember how many times you rushed to pay their rent when the landlord came, knocking. I remember seeing you load furniture into trucks, buying things with your own money so they could live decently. Her voice trembled, but her conviction was steady. You sacrificed everything for them, and now they repay you with betrayal. It's not right. It's not just, and you will not face this alone. Tears filled my eyes. For so long I had felt invisible, as though my sacrifices had disappeared into thin air. But here was someone, an ordinary neighbor, who had witnessed it. All her words were not just comfort. They were validation. Proof that I had not imagined my years of giving. Proof that the world had seen me, even when my son and his wife had not. Mrs. Green promised to stand by me. If they drag you into court, she said, I'll testify. I'll tell the judge exactly what I saw. I'll speak the truth when others only spread lies. Her words lit a fire in me. For the first time, I realized I was not truly alone. There were eyes that had seen. There were hearts that understood, and that truth gave me strength. But one ally was not enough. I needed more than kindness. I needed defense. I needed someone who could fight their lies with law, their papers with power. And then, as if fate had been waiting, the phone rang. It was David, an old friend of my late husband, a lawyer, a man who had known my family for years. I heard what's happening, he said. His voice was calm, steady, but laced with quiet fury. They think they can intimidate you. They think they can take what's yours, but they are wrong, and I will help you prove it. I almost collapsed with relief. After weeks of fear, of reading threats I barely understood. Here was someone who spoke the language of the battlefield. David came over that same evening. He sat at my kitchen table, spreading out the letters and legal papers the attorney had left. His brow furrowed as he read. His jaw tightened. These are nothing but scare tactics, he muttered. They're trying to bully you, but don't worry, I've seen this before, and we can fight it. He asked me for everything. Receipts of rent I had paid. Bank statements of transfers I had made. Bills from the furniture store. Even grocery slips from the countless times I had filled their fridge. At first, I hesitated. Did I really want to dig through the mountain of proof of my own sacrifices? Would it not hurt to relive every dollar, every hour, every ounce of love I had given? But David's words gave me courage. Every paper is a weapon, he said. Every receipt is a shield. You may feel pain gathering them, but they will bring you justice. So I gathered them day after day. I pulled out boxes, searched drawers, dug through old files, and with every piece of paper I found, a strange feeling grew inside me. Yes, it hurt to remember. Yes, it hurt to see the proof of how much I had given, but it also gave me strength. Because with every slip of paper, I was no longer a victim of vague memories. I was armed with evidence, undeniable, unshakable. David looked over the pile one evening, his eyes narrowing with determination. This is enough, he said. They can twist words, they can spread lies, but numbers don't lie. Paper doesn't lie. This will show the truth. He leaned forward, his voice steady, powerful. You will not lose your home. You will not lose your dignity, not while I stand beside you. And so, with Mrs. Green's testimony and David's legal strength, I began to feel something I had not felt in months. Hope that the sacrifices I made would finally be recognized. Hope that the truth would outshine the lies. Hope that I could walk into that courtroom, not as a broken, humiliated woman, but as someone prepared to fight. Late one night, as I organized the last of the receipts, I paused and looked at them spread across the table. Each one told a story. Each one was a chapter of my life. Each one whispered, "You gave, you sacrificed, you mattered." Now, finally, those whispers would become a voice the world would hear. The storm was still raging. The threats had not stopped, but now, I was no longer standing alone in the rain. Beside me stood a neighbor who had seen my sacrifices. Beside me stood a lawyer who believed in justice. Together, we would walk into that courtroom. Together, we would speak the truth. Together, we would expose the lies. And though fear still lingered in my heart, it was no longer greater than my resolve. Because with allies by my side, I was not just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my worth. I was fighting for every sacrifice I had ever made. I was fighting for me, and deep down, I knew this fight would not just end with defense, it would end with confrontation. With truth clashing against lies, with justice standing against betrayal. And when that moment came, I would be ready. For the first time in years, I truly believed I could win. The day of the confrontation finally arrived. Whether it was in a courtroom or before family gathered together, the air was charged with tension. Every step I took toward that place felt heavier than stone. But I was not alone. Mrs. Green walked beside me, her kind eyes steady, her voice a quiet reassurance. You don't have to be afraid. The truth will speak. And David, my lawyer and friend, carried the stack of receipts and documents, each one a weapon of truth ready to pierce through the lies. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. On one side sat my son and Lena. She wore that same smug smile, the smile that had first declared me not special. And when her eyes met mine, they sparkled with arrogance. She truly believed the day would end with my defeat. My son, he still couldn't meet my eyes. His silence had become his shield. But silence can also be guilt. The proceedings began. The daughter-in-law wasted no time. Her voice rang through the room, smooth, confident, laced with venom. She's exaggerating. We never asked her for help. She insisted on paying things for us. She made herself part of our lives. But we never wanted her to. Each word landed like a hammer. Each sentence twisted the knife deeper. I clenched my fists under the table. How dare she? How dare she erase 3 years of sacrifice with one lie? But lies have short legs. They can only run so far before the truth catches them. David rose calmly, placing the first stack of receipts on the table. Is that so? He asked. Then perhaps you can explain this 3 years of rent payments, all made directly by my client. Every month, without fail, $500, for 36 months. The room fell silent. The papers spoke louder than any accusation. Lena shifted, but quickly recovered. That was her choice, she said sharply. She insisted. We never asked. David didn't flinch. Then perhaps you can explain this furniture store bills, signed in her name, delivered directly to your apartment, the sofa you sit on today, the bed you sleep in every night, the table where you eat, all purchased by her. Gasps rippled through the room. Mrs. Green nodded firmly. I saw it, she said, her voice clear. I watched her carry furniture into your home with her own hands. I watched her give, while you took. Lena's face flushed red, her composure cracking. Still, she fought on. She exaggerates everything. We could have managed without her. She made herself the martyr. But David was relentless. He laid down grocery receipts, bank transfers, even handwritten notes from the landlord thanking me for paying rent on their behalf. Does this look like exaggeration? He asked coldly. Or does it look like sacrifice? For the first time, Lena faltered. Her voice trembled, her hands shook, and all eyes turned to my son. Would he speak? Would he defend her lies? Or would he finally face the truth? The silence stretched long. Then, slowly, he lowered his head further, and with a broken whisper, he said the words that shattered their facade. She's telling the truth. My mother paid it all. Every word she says is true. The room erupted. Lena's face twisted in fury. She turned on him, hissing through clenched teeth. How dare you betray me like this? But betrayal was hers, not his, and now, the mask had fallen. David pressed the final blow. He lifted one receipt, dated just months before the betrayal. This, he said, holding it high, is proof she filled your fridge when you had nothing to eat, and yet, you excluded her from your wedding. You called her not special. You humiliated her in her own home. He turned to the judge, or to the gathered family. This is not just about money. This is about dignity, this is about truth. The weight of his words filled the room. The evidence surrounded them like walls, closing in. And for the first time, I saw fear in Lena's eyes. Her lies had crumbled. Her arrogance had collapsed. Her empire of deceit was in ruins. In that moment, I felt something shift deep inside me. The humiliation, the years of sacrifice, the pain of being erased, all of it, began to lift, because the truth had spoken. And the truth was mine. The decision was swift. The lies were dismissed. The evidence stood tall. The house, my sanctuary, was declared my unshakable. Justice had finally arrived. Lena stormed out, her fury echoing in every step. My son lingered for a moment, his eyes wet, his shoulders heavy, but he said nothing. Perhaps guilt silenced him. Perhaps shame. And then he, too, walked away. But I remained. I stood tall. For the first time in years, I was not bowed by sacrifice. I was not chained by humiliation. I was free. Mrs. Green embraced me, her voice trembling with joy. You did it. You stood tall, and the truth won. David placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. This is your victory, and no one can take it away. As I stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter, fresher, alive. The storm had passed. The lies had been destroyed, and I had risen from the ashes. No longer the victim. No longer the erased. No longer the invisible. Mother cast aside by those she loved. I was strong. I was free. I was special, not because they said so, but because I had claimed it for myself. And though scars remained, they were proof of survival. Proof of strength. Proof that even the deepest betrayal scanned its silence. The truth forever. The showdown was over. The lies were shattered, and I walked away not as the broken one, but as the victorious one. When the decision was made, a silence washed over me. It wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of peace. The house, my house, was legally secured in my name. The papers were final. The threats had been crushed. The lies had been exposed. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely. The very next day, I called a locksmith. I watched as he changed the locks, one by one. Each click of the new lock was like a chain breaking from my heart. No longer would they storm in, bringing demands, dragging shadows into my home. This house was mine, and mine alone. I gathered the old keys into my hand. Cold, heavy, filled with memories of betrayal. And then, I dropped them in the trash. That sound metal against metal wasn't just garbage falling. It was the sound of freedom. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning sun spilling through the window. For once, there was no dread in my chest, no fear of who might call, or what new demand might arrive. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam curled gently, and I wrapped my hands around it, savoring the warmth, and as I took that first sip, I smiled, because this cup was mine, not bought for someone else, not drained by sacrifice, but mine, simple, peaceful, beautiful. Later that week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I planned a small trip. Not a grand vacation, not something to impress the world, just a short, joyful escape with a few true friends. Friends who had stood by me. Friends who valued me. Friends who didn't measure my worth by what I could give them, but by who I was. We laughed, we walked under the open sky, and for the first time in years, I felt light again. My home, once filled with the weight of betrayal, now felt alive. I filled it with plants, with music, with books I had always wanted to read. Each corner became a reflection of me, not of sacrifices made for others. For so long, I had lived for my son, for his wife, for their endless needs. But now, I lived for myself. One evening, I stood once more before the mirror. The same mirror that had once shown me a broken woman. Now, it showed someone new. Stronger. Freer. Unshaken. I whispered to my reflection. Love cannot be bought. And real family never demands a price for respect. The woman in the mirror nodded back. And this time, I believed her. I no longer carried resentment. I no longer craved an apology that would never come. Instead, I carried wisdom. The wisdom of survival. The wisdom of knowing my worth. Because family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by love, by loyalty, by respect, freely given, not bought, not bargained, not demanded. The locks were changed. The ties were cut. The house was mine. And more importantly, so was my life. I was no longer a victim of betrayal. I was no longer the invisible one, the erased one, the humiliated one. I was free, and I was whole. That is the power of truth. That is the gift of transformation. And that is the victory of a heart that finally chooses itself. And now, dear listener, I turn this question to you. What would you do if your own child betrayed you like this? Would you forgive? Hold on to the bond no matter how broken it became? Or would you cut ties forever, choosing peace over pain, choosing freedom over endless humiliation? Tell me in the comments below. Your voice matters. Your story may help someone else walking through the same storm. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about love, about sacrifice, about the true meaning of family, then I invite you to stay with me. Like this video, share it with someone who needs strength, and most of all, subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories of betrayal, courage, and transformation. Because in the end, life is not just about what we give, it's about who truly values us. And remember, love cannot be bought, respect cannot be forced, and real family never demands a price. So tell me, what would you do? The choice is yours.